In today's episode, we see the dreams of a community dashed by the ultimate betrayal. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, I have a great episode for you today. We have co-writers Will Burson and also Cheney and Keith Lucas to chat about Judas and the Black Messiah. And you know, Judas and the Black Messiah was nominated for a WGA award. So I definitely hope if you dig the film, you tell your friends about it and continue to help get the word out there. And this is a good interview because it was fascinating to see how the Lucas brothers and Will all worked with Shaka King, the writer-director, who is not in this episode, but was also nominated with them. And, you know, Shaka did just an amazing job as a director, ranging from his shot compositions and excellent cinematography to the performances he elicited from the really talented actors. So, you know, shout out to Shaka as well for a job well done too. But there's so many great things we talked about how the process worked between these three different writers, all working with Shaka, that I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You know, you could find us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And there's so much to explore in issue 42, which is our new issue. And, you know, I really hope you check out our table of contents over there. We have unpublished screenplays by writers of note in our off the shelf section. And with this issue, we have two amazing scripts, one by Simon Kinberg, which was the first script he ever sold, getting into the business, went right back when he started. And we also have a script from Joe Carnahan called LA 57, which is a really awesome script that he's been working on for a decade that he is still hoping to get made. And we have the entire script in there, along with an interview with both of these writers and so much more to explore. So I hope you check out our table of contents. If you want to test drive us, you could check out our free issue over at backstory.net or in the iPad app. It's a full issue, so there's a lot to explore in there as well. And the hope is, after reading all that, you want to become a subscriber, and we would love to have you. So I could give you a coupon code that will save you a little money off your subscription. It's discount code SAVE5. That's save and the number 5. And you can enter that in your shopping cart at backstory.net. And your credentials, by subscribing there, you'll be able to get that discount. You'll also be able to use your same login credentials there to log into our iPad app. So it'll work both ways for you. But look, there's so much to explore. I really hope you consider checking out my passion project. Thanks for considering. You know, during the pandemic, we've been taking the video of all these interviews and putting them in the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. So I hope you check that if you want to watch us do these interviews. You could, of course, if you're only discovering us on YouTube, you could find the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast over in iTunes and Spotify. So I just wanted everybody to know where all these different elements are, because it gets a little confusing sometimes. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with co-writers Will Burson, Cheney, and Keith Lucas to chat about their debut feature film, Judas and the Black Messiah. All right. So Cheney, Keith, Will, how's it going, y'all? It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Good to see you too, man.
I absolutely loved your film at 2021 Sundance. That's where I saw it. And I was so glad that Sundance was able to get a festival together and nonetheless have a film like this premiere in it. And, you know, it's totally honest, no surprise to me that you guys all shared a WGA nomination for screenplay, which recently came out. So congrats on that, along with Shaka King, who also directed. So, you know, we're going to get into your creative habits today and then get into, you know, the details behind the mechanics of the story. So, you know, just starting with everybody, Cheney and Keith, tell us where you're from and when you knew you wanted to be a filmmaker. And then Will, same question to you.
So we're originally from Newark, New Jersey, born and raised in the 80s.
I mean, makes the world takes.
You said you were from Newark when you lived in Newark, right, Will?
No, I'm from New York.
New York. Sorry, I thought you said Newark. Okay, well.
No, yeah, sorry. I just that sign on the bridge is so devastating. Yeah. It's Newark makes the world takes, right?
That's right.
It always depressed me when I saw that.
That's true. Oh, it's
Trenton. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Never mind. Not Newark. I'm going to shut up now.
I'm sorry. So yeah, we're from Newark, New Jersey. we grew up during the crack epidemic, and our father. We gotta go into this kind of detail. Our father went to prison, and he was like, kind of out of our lives really early. But
I mean, he was there, but he was in prison.
He was there, but he was
it
in
made
prison.
the relationship a lot tougher.
Right, of course.
That's generally what prison does.
That's right. So but he would take us to the movies before he got locked up, and I think that's when we kind of fell in love with cinema. One of the first films we ever saw was Total Recall, and it just kind of blew our minds, and we were just like kind of warped. We were so fucking young, and like, why are we watching this? It's like, the lady with the 3 breaths. It was just, it was Total Recall was a lot, but I think that was like the sort of the foundation of our love for cinema, everything cinema.
Okay. Just because you brought this up, I'm going to geek out with you for a second. You know how movies have novelizations?
Sure. Yeah.
So I read the novelization back in the day of Total Recall because I was like so eager to see the movie. And I love Philip K. Dick, who wrote the short story. And you know that thing that they put their hands in on the planet?
Yeah.
Like it's just there, right? And it's like, why is it there? And like the one part of the movie that the novelization kind of answered was that question, in which if they didn't put their hands in that device to give Mars air, humanity was going to be like erased as a species, like by these ever-present aliens that we're watching. Because, you would always say to yourself, like, well, why is that thing there? Why can they make air on Mars? And basically it was a final test to humanity. Like, could they be kind, or were they going to do what they were already doing in the movie, which is charge, $10 for a little bottle of air and all that stuff. Yeah. But
I didn't know that.
Anyhow, yes, it's in the novelization by Piers Anthony, and I had him interviewed for my magazine once about it. So yeah, good on Total Recall, man. I'm with you.
Isn't it fantastic? I remember one time for New Year's, this was recent New Year's, we did ketamine. It was acid. We did acid, and we watched Total Recall on loop. We watched it once, and then we watched it again, and I was like, it's even better this time.
But, all right. Kenny and Keith, last question before we move on to Will. The remake of Total Recall, yes or no?
I haven't seen it.
No.
Okay, all right.
The original.
Okay, Will, tell me when you knew that you wanted to be a filmmaker and kind of where you grew up. You obviously said New York.
Yeah, but before I answer that, I want you guys to meet Kawato. I don't actually have a Kawato. I wish I had a Kawato.
That would be the greatest episode ever.
Quaid. That's my creative touchstone too.
That was a great way to end the joke, man. That was great.
Kawato is like the OG Fred Hampton, leading the resistance. Oh, I didn't mean that nearly as disrespectfully as it came out. I'm from New York. I grew up in Harlem, and I want to be a painter most of my life. Actually, and that's what I studied. I didn't go to art school. I went to a small liberal arts college, and I hated most of my art classes and teachers. I hated the teachers. I loved art classes. And loved all the English classes I took in college. And I did improv and theater in college. And since I grew up in New York, I was lucky enough when summers home from school, I would take classes at the New School. So I took screenwriting classes and I took filmmaking classes. I got to edit on an old Steenbeck. And I just realized how much I loved it. And then...
Did you say where you went to school, Will? Because if you did, I didn't hear it.
No, Haverford. It's a small private school outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I went to Bronx Science, went to huge public high school. And I knew I wanted to play baseball, and I knew I probably couldn't walk on anywhere else, which is sort of largely how I ended up there. But I despite not liking the art department, like I made incredible friends and had a great time. But my first job out of school was interning at John Leguizamo's production company.
Interning where?
I'm sorry, John Leguizamo's production company.
Oh, okay, great.
In New York. And I still thought I wanted to be a painter then, but my boss there recommended me to a friend of hers who was a producer on Spin City, which was shooting in New York then. So I was able to get a writer's assistantship on Spin City. I'd never had the PA or anything. And I was like, wow, this is incredibly fun and lucrative. And I was taking classes at UCB then, before there was a UCB in the late 90s in New York. They were renting a place called Solo Arts. So I studied with the core 4 UCB guys. And I just, it just sort of became a more and more a creative outlet that was more accessible to me than fine art was, for whatever reason. So it's something I wrote scripts in college and stuff, and I did theater, but it never really seemed like a professionally viable until I kind of lucked into it out of school.
And so TV was your breaking in story, basically.
Yeah, and I love TV. I'm an unabashed TV fan, and that's how I got.
And this is your first feature, obviously. Your first feature credit.
First feature, yeah.
Kenny and Keith, same question to you. Did you go to school for it? Did you study?
No, we went to college for philosophy. Actually, we studied philosophy.
Where'd you go?
We went to the College of New Jersey.
Yep. So we studied philosophy. Then we graduated and we went to law school for a couple of years.
Really? Yeah. What kind of law did you want to pursue?
I think I was going to do bankruptcy law.
Yeah, I was doing tax law. The exciting tax law.
Okay.
Amazing.
It was pretty soul crushing.
But we dropped out like we dropped out like a week before graduating to pursue stand-up comedy full time.
What did your mom think of that one?
She thought we were insane. She
thought we were crazy.
Yeah.
Which is I think is a reasonable thought to have.
Right.
Wait, a serious question. Law school is pretty rough, man. So why not just go that extra week and get your degree and then go do some comedy?
I mean, I think the problem was like I was right across the street from the Comedy Cellar. So I was like, I would constantly be inundated with comedy, and I was just like, I really want to do it. I would see like Patrice O'Neal, and I would see like a Bill Burr. I saw all these great comedians, and I'm like, man, I really want to do it. I really want to do it. And I was like, what's the better story? Me getting my degree and kind of like, if I don't make it, then going back to law, or saying I fucking dropped out. I felt like that was a more rebellious story. I didn't feel like it's just a crazier story. And it's just like, I feel like, in my mind, I was like, someday I'm going to tell this narrative on the big screen. What's gonna like really pop? And I felt like that.
It was either that or the drugs.
Or drugs. Yeah. It could have been drugs. I was totally on drugs when I was making these.
Why not both?
Or maybe both. You're right. Maybe it was a synthesis.
Wait, can I, Jeff? I don't want to hijack your podcast. Can I ask the Lucas brothers a quick question? Which,
please,
forgive me. You guys probably get this all the time, but Dimitri Martin also dropped out of law school, right?
Yep.
Like, have you?
NYU. He went to NYU
law. Have you guys is there like a thing? Is there something that like law like crushes your soul to the point where you're like, fuck it, I gotta go, I gotta do a set somewhere? Like I'm not even.
That's essentially it. It's like in the Joker, when you have that one bad day. And then you snap and you become a comedian. That's sort of what law school is like, but for a year.
It makes sense, man. All right, cool. I'm sure you've been asked that question a lot. I always wondered about it though, because I think he's great too.
Right. He's phenomenal.
Right.
No, that's fascinating. Obviously, you made the right choice by dropping out. I guess you left yourself no other option. Like you had nothing to return to.
If it doesn't, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But also, there's a fucking move. Like I know your thing that you may or may not talk about is maybe autobiographical, but like there's your high concept comedy, a stand-up comic whose like friend gets arrested and he was a week away from his JD and he goes and defends him. I mean, come on.
Right.
Like
yes, we'll cover that right at the end. Like there was very good news today for the Lucas brothers, but we'll cover that at the end. But so okay, you go down the comedy route. What was your breaking in moment? I know you guys made a bunch of short films, so it seems like you cut your teeth on that. Tell us a little more about kind of your experience filmmaking and then getting into writing as well.
So we were, we did Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. We were doing a lot of sketch comedy with Friends of the People. We did some short films. We did 22 Jump Street. We did animation. So we were kind of doing like a little bit
just experimenting with this.
Tell people what you did on 21 Jump Street, just so they know.
We basically were like the next door neighbors to Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill.
Right.
We were like sort of these aloof stoners / philosophical / I don't know. Just like basically drug dealers of the school.
It was a big role.
It was huge. We didn't think we were gonna get it. I mean, we kind of just auditioned as ourselves, and it happened. But before that, we were just bombing every audition, so we didn't really think.
Wait, I always love asking actors this. What was the worst audition that you had? The one that haunts you to this very day?
Jeez, I know it was one where they made us go like. We always like to audition together because like that's our act and this is what we're selling to people. But there was this one audition where they made us audition for one part separately. And so I went in first, he went in second, and I went in it was quite possibly one of the worst auditions I've ever had. And then he had to come in the next time. And I was like, why would you guys make him audition for the part that I just bombed? Like, it's like...
I'm not going to do better. Like, I'm not going to elevate the performance. You're going to get the same shitty performance back to back.
So it was very strange. I hate auditioning.
Yeah, it's terrible.
All right. I'm sorry that you had to relive that trauma. But so when did you start screenwriting for you guys? Because obviously Will was starting doing TV stuff. when did you start realizing that you were going to go long form rather than the short films and do screenwriting?
So we were writing our Lucas Bros moving code. That was like 15 minutes. And that was like our first, like, but the script ended up being like 30 pages. So that was like the big sort of like thing. And then we started working on this Apatow project. That was like pretty much our first introduction into screenwriting. Yeah. We started doing that in 2013, and it's just been
so we were working on that. And then
really? So you've been developing that with him since 2013?
Yeah, we were developing that before Judas.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, spoiler alert for all the listeners, that was the big news we were going to break, because it finally broke officially today that it is going to be a project that Judd Apatow is producing. I didn't realize it was around that long. So your script is done for this. You guys are done with that script.
Yeah. It was a very long and arduous process, and we almost got into some fights. And Joe, I was mad at Joe. It was a lot. Like it was driving us insane.
It's constant rewrites, right? So like,
right.
It's like you're on your rewrite, your 100th rewrite, and you're just like losing.
That's what Apatow loves, like for everybody that's worked with him. So, and it's definitely worked for his process. Well, okay. Well, so for the group, because I know you guys came on at different times, let's set the timeline of when you came on for starting the project of Judas and the Black Messiah. Who was it that was on first? Was it?
Well, we were kind of working simultaneously, actually.
Right.
So okay, tell us how it worked. Set the stage.
Start with Jordan.
Oh, okay. Sure. I'd written a spec script in 2015 and probably finished it late 2015. That was a little more traditional biopic. I hope a little more sophisticated than just a biopic, not staid and boring, but a biopic. And the main foil wasn't O'Neill. O'Neill was in it. It was Hoover.
Definitely a very subversive biopic.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Thank you for saying that. And because the story is so intrinsically awful, and because Fred Hampton was so funny, I thought it might be good to try to get it to an actor to play him. So I gave the script to Jermaine Fowler, whom I didn't know, but I knew through UCB. I used to teach and perform there, and so I had mutual friends. And it's funny. He didn't read it, and then months later, I saw him at a juice bar, and I accosted him, and he was great. He was totally gracious, and we talked for half an hour, and then he read it, and he said, "It's great. My reps want me doing comedy franchises," and I was like, cool, that sounds like a much better plan. And I thought that was the end of it. And unbeknownst to me, he had sent the script to Shaka because he knew Shaka King, the director, and the Lucas brothers were trying to develop were working on their own structure that was, I'll let you guys take it from there, but there's a part of it inside COINTELPRO. And Shaka and I met, and he said, I want to sort of marry our structure with your script. And I was like, wow, the Departed inside COINTELPRO is fucking brilliant. And that I was immediately sold.
Will, what was the title of your script? Was it Judas and the Black Messiah, or did it have a different title?
My initial title was The Assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton by the Closet Queen Mulatto, Edgar Hoover.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that title.
That was my original title. Because it was a sort of like, everyone knows Hoover was a closet homosexual, but very few people know that his father was half black. And that was sort of what I was kind of digging at. And I wasn't trying to make him sympathetic, but I was trying to have him be sort of a human villain.
Wow, that is amazing title.
I like it, and certainly all the mythic lawman stuff and the subversion of that. Yeah, that was my original title. Bit of a mouthful.
Well, so Kenny and Keith, tell us about when you came on and when you had a look at Will's script and kind of coming on at that point.
So yeah, we were developing a treatment of sorts of a story kind of centered on William O'Neill as infiltrating the Black Panthers, and we kind of pitched that around town, hoping to get funding to write a script, and we got nothing.
Right.
And so
we kind of like, I don't know, we kind of just like took a break from it. We were just like, we need to rethink our strategy, and for the next time we present this to the industry. And so we were like, I think we need to link up with a filmmaker. We need someone who we think could, take this to the next level, and basically like, someone like Shaka, not only is he immensely talented, but he has the skills to sort of sell ideas.
Right.
And so, once we were able to link up with Shaka, we were doing this FX pilot. Who was it for?
It was a Killer Mike FX pilot. It eventually went to Netflix. It's called Trigger Warning. Yeah. But we were doing a segment with Shaka. And we filmed, it was like a 10-hour day, 11 hour, I don't know what it was. It was very grueling. But we just sort of
because of our comedy.
Probably because of our comedy and our acting, we made it longer than it had to be. But Shaka was just fucking chill, man. He was just like the most laid back, just awesome person, and just like we just hit it off. I don't know. I just really liked him.
Right. Just as a director, we liked him. So,
right.
And this was before we even like watched any of his stuff. We just like liked him as a director.
Right.
Just how he like conducted himself on set and how it was just real mellow. And so we went back and watched all of his stuff, and we were like, oh shit, this guy's a fucking genius.
He's a genius.
He's a person who we think could take this idea and take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So we were doing all this before we even reached out to him. So we were talking to Jermaine about it. We were talking to Jermaine about Shaka. And Shaka didn't even know we were talking about him. And then he talked to Jermaine, and Jermaine was like, I heard you were working on that Fred Hampton idea with the Lucas brothers. He didn't even know. Right. So we finally reached out to him and was like, look, man, we want to pitch you this idea.
Right.
And he came to our place in Hollywood, and we just like, for a couple of hours, just kind of just like sold him on this idea. Like we want to do The Departed inside COINTELPRO, and we want to have an informant go in. And he, I think he saw the movie instantly, and he started coming back with his references from 70s cinema.
Yeah, I was like, this guy.
Yeah, like, we were like, this guy's next level. Like he has a level of expertise that we just couldn't really comprehend. And he took the idea and just sort of
made it a masterpiece.
Yeah, just ran with it.
That's awesome.
We finally linked up with Shaka, and then that's when Jermaine linked us with Will. We had started working with Shaka, and then he basically found out about Will's script, and then made the connection.
Right.
And that's what turned everything around, really.
Right.
And once we all linked up, that's when.
Well, and that's a good situation in which you guys were already looking into the project, but Will had already put in a bunch of time and research. So what was your first interpretation of like seeing his script and realizing that you could craft it, piecemeal into what you guys were forging?
I was like amazed at crazy how funny it was. You know what I mean? Because when you think about this subject matter, you don't really think about it from a humor standpoint. And I was like, this is darkly funny. Right. And I think you kind of see that in Judas. Right. It's darkly funny. It's a very dark subject matter, but that's why we're so fortunate.
But when the jokes hit, they fucking hit. And I think that's like the power of a great script, not a good script, a great script where you can take like really dark subject matter, but then tie in those jokes. And I think that was ever present in Will's script. And
I was going to bring that up because, a movie like this, you're not sure what you're getting into and you expect something pretty heavy. And so bringing levity at just like the right moments really benefited it a lot, I thought. Will, was that something that you were conscious of when you were doing your draft, of when you thought the audience might be able to take a joke early on?
Yeah, I think so. And my response would be like twofold. I would my hope, at least, and the way I tried to execute it, was they can take a joke whenever I can find it, because it was so hard. It doesn't fit naturally. But the other thing is, like, I had a lot of speeches in my early drafts, which I've been disabused of that impulse since then by people like Ryan Coogler, who are brilliant filmmakers. It's like, okay, great, but I really wanted those speeches to be set pieces and to feel like Bring the Pain or Delirious, to feel like a really intense, dynamic, kind of fraught stand-up set.
You see that in the scene with Daniel at the church. I've been saying this, like, when I was on set with that scene, it felt like a stand-up show. Like it felt like the energy was palpable, and the back and forth between Daniel and the audience. I was like, oh, this feels like the rhythm of a stand-up show, without a doubt.
Well, so let's talk about your creative process for a second. When you sit down to write, for all of you, same question: how important is outlining to your process? Will, starting with you.
It is and it isn't. I think it's strange. A lot of what I write is historical and true, and I feel like and part of that's because I'm a writer and I'm lazy. So if I have an idea and I get $200 with used books and I read for 6 months, I can tell myself I'm working when I'm not. But I usually have such a wealth of information and like a timeline, a really detailed timeline that's almost like an outline. And then I sort of I kind of reverse engineer act breaks from what the actual historical events, which I was sort of able to do in my early drafts here. I would definitely outline heavily once Shaka and I restructured it with the Lucas brothers, the COINTELPRO and the Departed thing, and we had an incredibly long outline. I just finished another spec script though, where I had a pretty detailed outline, but there was plenty I didn't know, and it was kind of liberating going into it and just being like, I just got to figure some of this shit out along the way. Because I usually am pretty dogmatic about outlining, but I like the idea of not being so dogmatic about it. It seems
okay. I mean, there's no one way to do it. That's what's awesome. Kenny and Keith, what's your thoughts on outlining?
It really depends on the project. Like, with Judas, it's so heavy. It's a drama. You don't want to fuck it up. So I was just like, we outlined like crazy. Like we were just like, we would write an outline, we would toss it just to try to figure out like what's the best way to tell the story.
Right.
I mean, we spent a lot of time just trying to like figure out like what's the most efficient way to tell the story, because there's so much information.
Right.
I mean, you can do a mini series on what happened in the late 60s in Chicago. I mean, you even getting into like the local political scene and Hammerhand and what happened after the fact in the legal world. I mean, it's all riveting stuff. So it's just tough to like figure out like, okay, what's the most efficient way to tell the story? At least in terms of like trying to sell it to studios and production companies. So, but with comedy, it's a little different. It's like, you kind of want to let your mind flow a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, I think we're very structured with jokes, and obviously you got to be structured with storytelling. But especially with Lucas for the Moving Coast, sometimes we would just. With the Apatow project, I outlined like crazy. Like, I've been obsessive about it. But with the animated show, sometimes I outline. I mean, I was so stoned while we were writing it that I don't even really remember. And a lot of times with that, like a lot of the show was made during like once you're doing voiceover work, you know what I mean? You kind of just improv in the booth, and so what you had on page didn't necessarily translate to what made it to the animated show.
Well, so tell me this, when you're sitting down to write, and then same question for Will, when you're sitting down to write, do you give yourself, on Judas, did you give yourself a certain amount of hours to write each day, or did you give yourself a page count that you wanted to hit each day? Just again, looking into your creative process.
Will, you want to do that?
Boy, I had just had my first kid when I started writing Judas, so any number of hours or pages I could do a day was a blessing. Honestly, I know it's kind of a cheap answer, but I'm by nature I'm a night owl, and I would write. If I had my own druthers, I'd write from like 9 p.m. to 2 or 3 in the morning. I feel like that's when I'm most productive. But once you have a baby, that shit's out the window. Right. So I didn't. It was kind of piecemeal. It was whenever I could find the time to work. Although my wife recently reminded me that she referred to the script as my mistress because I was spending so much time on it. So maybe I wasn't as distracted by my child, whatever her name is. But anyway, that's how it felt at the time.
All right, Kenny and Keith, you guys give yourself a page count to hit each day or a certain amount of time?
I mean, I think we try to. I wanted to be disciplined about writing and like sit down and do 10 hours, but it's very difficult for me. Sometimes I just have like moments where I just don't feel like doing anything.
And then when we go on the road and do stand up, like, because sometimes we're trying to work on an hour and build that out, so it's tough to like figure out the time when to write. But when we were doing the Judge script, we were on the road in Toronto. We just had to like.
Yeah, we went from Montreal to Toronto, and then every once in a while, when you can wake up in the morning and do it, you'll write. The great thing about stand-up is you have your days, so you can write in the daytime and perform at night. So that's
if you're proactive.
If you're proactive enough, we were not. So, but when we're going hard, we try to write in the daytime and perform at night.
Okay. And so, just one last big writing question for you guys, and everybody handles it differently. Just briefly, what do you do when you get writer's block? How do you battle it if you get it?
Stand-up helps. Just, being able to get on stage and just like say some stuff to get things off your mind. But not doing stand-up, I mean, I don't know how how do you do it? I don't
know. It's weird. I'm going to get a little personal here. I feel like I just had my first bout of writer's block in my life because it always seemed like such kind of an indulgent cliche. I didn't want to believe in it. My sister died 18 months ago, and I noticed that it's funny. Like I spent the first like 15 months totally overwhelmed by the grief and truly feeling like I was losing my mind. And then there was this 3-month window when I didn't feel anything and I couldn't cry. And I was talking to my therapist, and he's like, "Do you think the emotional block and the creative block are related?" And I was like, "Oh, duh." But it didn't occur to me. I wish I had an easy answer for people because I have finally gotten out of it. But what I will say is reassuring is Steve Martin, I feel like at one point said that he doesn't mind when he may not use the word writer's block, but he says like when he gets stuck, he doesn't sweat it because he knows it means there's something like percolating in his head. And I feel like that's even if you have to lie to yourself and say that, it's a good mantra to be like, okay, there's still whatever subconscious processes are going on creatively, whether or not I can access them right now. And hopefully once I'm ready to access them, they'll be there at my disposal. That's at least my mantra that I tell myself to make myself feel better.
Right. No,
my condolences, man. That's really rough for him. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be a bummer. I just
no.
It just happened. I was like, I didn't even believe in this. It's bullshit.
Thanks for telling us.
Yeah.
No, I lost my friend in 2019. Very, very close friend, Kevin Barnett, comedian. And after that, I had a period where I could not write, couldn't think about, like, because we'd done so much together. He helped us on our animated show. We did stand-up together. We worked on the sketch show together. So every memory that I had of writing comedy, especially, was attached to him. So it was impossible to even like get into it.
Grief plays a huge role. I mean, it's like, it's so like emotionally overwhelming. It's tough to like clear your mind to think about like a joke or even a set piece in a drama. It's just like, just tough. It's just tough.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your friend's loss as well. And I mean, what you guys are touching on is what a lot of writers have dealt with this year, with the pandemic, basically ranging from the uncertainty to the 500,000 deaths in the United States that have touched people's lives. Yeah. And, it's been interesting to see writers talk about it and hear writers talk about it, because ultimately just, trying to push forward seems to be the best way out of it when people are ready without, overdoing it to themselves. Right. Well, so, okay, just before we get into the spoilers, I just want to kind of set the timeline. So it seems like you guys were collaborating in concert with Shaka. Is that correct?
Right. So
including Will is what I mean.
Right. That was like 2016, 2017. Yeah. So I think around 2017, right?
Yeah. Shaka and I met in August 2017.
Right.
For the first time.
And we were working with Shaka around September 2016. So a couple months went by.
Okay.
Finally linked up with Will.
I love that you compared it to Departed, and because it's a great undercover film, and we're gonna talk about that dynamic as well. But what you touched on earlier, and this is a good place for us to kind of ask our last non-spoiler question, is this is not an easy project to set up, and it doesn't surprise me that it took years to do it. What do you think was the tipping point that made it a reality?
I think we had an excellent script. I think we had a fantastic, genius director. We had Ryan Coogler, and we had the fortunate grace of Charles King putting up half the financing. I think it took a lot of people making sacrifices. I mean, personal and professional sacrifices to get this story made. We had the blessings of Mother Akua and Fred Hampton Jr. That I think really gave us a spiritual advantage, more so than even a financial advantage. And I don't know, I just feel like it was just everything was clicking. And
that's not to say it wasn't without struggle, right? Obviously, when you're trying to get a movie made, it's tension and struggle. But I feel like Fred's spirit was so ubiquitous throughout set. I think everybody who, once they learned about the story, they were fully committed to the project and wanted to make it
and Daniel Kaluuya, the key,
of course.
Dominique. I mean, we had one of the best casts I've ever seen in a film, period. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we just had so many. We just had so many talented people involved, and I think it was such an overwhelming force of positivity that went into the pitch, the production. I think it just made it overwhelming.
What was the schedule?
42 days of shooting, I think.
42 days? Okay, that's cool. We can check.
October.
All right. Well, so this is the spoiler alert. If somehow you have clicked on this and you have not yet seen Judas and the Black Messiah, please press pause, go watch it however you could find it, and then come back for the rest of the conversation. So we are now getting into the spoilers, and this is as spoiler as could be, because it's something that you kind of begin and end the film with. And it's Bill O'Neill's Eyes on the Prize 2 documentary footage, which is fascinating as an ending, because as the credits say, when he's kind of been on the fence seemingly in the interview about what he did and was, saying it was right and it was a good time in his life, and then he committed suicide later that night.
Right.
And, the previous movie is all the guilt leading up to that moment. At what point did you realize that literally after having that interview air, that he committed suicide probably because of the shame of it, and know that that was going to be your ending of this betrayal story?
I don't think we knew the ending, but we certainly, when we came across that story or that interview, that was like one of the first things we stumbled upon in our research. We only had the transcript though, and that was around 2013?
Yeah.
In 2013, we found the transcript and we read that. We read the interview over and over and over and over, and we were just like, this is like fascinating. It was so like lost to history and such a footnote, but we were just shocked at like, how could something like this be so not remembered? No one talks about it. It's not in any of the history books. And so like, this could be a good framing device for a film. And that was around 2013, 2014.
Right.
Okay.
But we didn't get the actual footage until closer to production. Shaka found the full interview.
Right.
Not even the Eyes on the Prize documentary, but just the interview.
Right.
And it's like an hour long, and it's terrifying.
Right.
It's even creepier than what we see in the film. It's just like, he's so cold. You just don't know. By that point, he's like, I think he's fully committed to the belief that he played a positive role in the struggle, but still had to grapple with the fact that he got a great man killed. And he just doesn't seem to show any emotion. And then once you find out that he committed suicide, you're like, oh, this dude is dying inside.
Right.
But he's a very, very creepy guy.
Shock and I actually, sorry.
No, go on.
I was gonna say, we had this crazy holy shit moment when we were in his Silver Lake Airbnb restructuring the outline, where we were talking about it. We were kind of like, okay, well, why did he kill himself when he did? And we just Googled it, and we realized that it was not only the night that it premiered. I don't think it was his episode. I think it was the series premiering, but it was also Martin Luther King Day. And it was like, so the symbolism there is so crazy. We were like, oh, like we both got chills because we hadn't put that together. And as far as we'd read in any of the research, no one had put that together either, that it was like that day. And it's crazy. And
then you see in the film, you start with, the montage, and you get that Dr. King was murdered, and then you end with Bill O'Neill killing himself on Martin Luther King Day. I mean, it's just a fucking crazy story.
Right. But it's the perfect arc to his narrative. I mean, how he got into the story versus how he essentially got out was bookended by a king, and it makes sense.
It's really fascinating. One of the things that the movie did beautifully that, I think should be called out is that it showed that the Black Panther movement itself had a lot of very altruistic aspects to it, which is a narrative that isn't often told historically. And, it was starting with defending the community, both, just ranging from, the meals for kids, which was, common and was going on in other different fashions. But especially in this particular community, there were a lot of needs and they were satisfying them. And they weren't a violent organization until they were pressed into violence. And they decided to use the same Second Amendment rights that everyone else had to arm themselves. And they were just one of the first groups to really do it when they were being, threatened by whoever was coming after them. And it's just fascinating. What were some of the other goals of showing the altruistic side of the Black Panthers that, you hadn't seen expressed in feature films before?
I think it's very important to show the altruistic side. I think it's important to show the camaraderie. I think it's important to show Hampton, as the script did eloquently, show him as a human. Like he was everything you see about Hampton. He's a superhuman. You know what I mean? Like everything he's doing, and he's rightfully so. But I think what the script did so poignantly is they humanized him, and I think that was a very important part of what we were trying to do with the Black Panther Party in general, was to humanize them.
Another fascinating thing like this is, you have the betrayal story. The title alone gives it that. What were some of the titles you guys played with, Kenny and Keith, by the way?
We were going to call it The Rise of the Black Messiah.
But even before that, we had Rise of the Messiah, we had Son of Slaves. We just had a bunch of different titles that didn't work out. And then once Shaka got involved. He wanted to go with Jesus Was My Homeboy, which we all thought was incredible.
Right.
And so we thought we were going to go with that. But then things happened and they said they wanted to change. So I think we went to a screening of like one of the harder cuts. It wasn't like completely done. And then we had a bunch of other titles that we had to reconsider. So it was like, what were some of the other titles? I know a lot. Judas was there, but there were a couple others that we had to vote on.
Right.
And then Judas, I think Judas won out, but
it's a great title, but so a story like this about betrayal, and we're going to get into the depths of Bill O'Neill's character in a second here. Because we're seeing it through his eyes, right? Fish out of water, which is a really good invention as well to get exposure to the world, because he's the outsider coming in, something that I thought worked really well about the script. But you did still need an antagonist of sorts and a personification of an antagonist. And I thought the character of Roy, the FBI agent handler, was interesting. Was he an actual person, or was he a composite of different people?
Actual.
yeah.
Okay. So if he was an actual person, what's fascinating is he has his own character arc rather than just being the bad guy, the racist agent who's toying with this. Because in the beginning, he actually seems to understand the goals of the movement and is in line with them. And he just kind of gets into the racism of Hoover and his other FBI colleagues to the point where, he's becoming a terrible person. So what did you learn through research about Roy's character, and tell us about crafting him three-dimensionally, which you did really well?
One thing that's important to mention, which we get asked about a lot, is did he really investigate Warner, Cheney, and Goodman's murders? And yeah, he did. Mm-hmm. I think there were well over 100 agents investigating that, so it may not speak anything to his character, but that's really important, because I think he believed the bullshit he was spewing, I think. And I think the other thing that's important is that while 100 whatever agents were investigating the Mississippi burning murders, FBI was tipping off the Klan about the whereabouts of freedom riders and civil rights workers. And I feel like that's, which obviously we don't literally explicate in the movie, but I think the degree to which he was genuinely committed to the American goal and the ideals, and you can't cheat your way to equality and that stuff. I think it has to be genuine for him to be human, and for him to be that much more flawed.
Right.
So I think that, but yes, there was a handful of stuff available about him to draw from, because he was absolutely real.
Did you guys ever get to see any of his files and see like how he handled Bill?
I just got his FBI files. I mean, literally maybe 2 weeks ago. I requested everything. I got Mitchell's. I just got Mitchell's.
Oh, crazy.
They're not, again, it's hundreds of pages. I just looked at a lot redacted. He was reprimanded a couple of times for how he handled his apparently he was like the rat whisperer, which I think is even written about, that he was just like, he was really good at grooming guys to talk. And he was reprimanded several times for, I think, not reporting things he was doing with his informants. And it stands to reason. So a couple things. The whole reason O'Neill was even outed was because he continued working in the FBI. He stayed in the Panthers. In 1973, he testified against a Chicago cop who killed drug dealers. Right. And I'm assuming Mitchell was still his handler at that point. And Mitchell was putting him in this position where maybe you kill a drug dealer or two. I think there's a lot more to potentially explore about Mitchell than we had time for. But he was in Korea. I think one thing we invented, at least from his draft records, I think he didn't even get to Korea until combat ended. And we have Hoover saying you killed in Korea. I think he was there after combat ended. But as much as we could, we hewed really closely to the truth about him.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or through our iPad app, Backstory. If you've never read us before, you could check out our free issue over at backstory.net or through the iPad app, and it'll let you explore an entire issue, actually. And it's with the hope that if you like what you see, you want to subscribe. And we'd love to have you as a subscriber. So if you want to subscribe, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. And you could use that at backstory.net only. And your login credentials for backstory.net will then work on a desktop or laptop, obviously, and also in our iPad apps. You're covered on all fronts. And we recently published issue 42. There's so many cool things in there. We worked so hard on it. And, you know, two things I just want to highlight really quick of the many things in there is interviews with writers of note that have unpublished screenplays that we published in their entirety. So in this issue, we have Simon Kinberg talking about writing Ghouls of New York, the first script he ever sold. And he talks about writing it, you know, long before he wrote X-Men Days of Future Past. This was how he got his start. And it's a cool unproduced screenplay about grave robbers in like the 1890s New York. We also have Joe Carnahan with a script he's been working on with his brother, Matthew Michael Carnahan, for over a decade called LA 57. And we published that screenplay in its entirety. We even have concept art. And Joe's actually getting closer and closer to making it into a movie, but you would get to read it first. So it's just one of the many reasons I hope you'll check out Backstory Magazine. You could also find excerpts from our articles on our website too. So you could always check back there for free excerpts. But look, it really means a lot to me to have you consider supporting my passion project. So thanks for considering. And, you know, I don't know how you discovered us or are listening to us right now, but I just wanted to put the shout out there again that during the pandemic, we have been taking these interviews, like what you're listening to right now, and we've been putting them on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. And if you only discovered us on YouTube and you didn't know it, you could also find us as the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast in iTunes or Spotify. So I just wanted both sides to know about each other. And now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with co-writers Will Burson and Kenny and Keith Lucas about their WGA-nominated film, Judas and the Black Messiah. A movie like this is sweeping a lot of time, a lot of different people. Tell us about A Left Turn. What's something that each of you had in the script at a certain point that people would be interested in hearing about that never made it off the page? Not even a cut scene that was shot, just like for a week or a day or something, you're convinced like this scene is awesome. This is going to be a great scene. And eventually you had to abandon it. And why? Because it's always interesting to hear about those left turns, especially something like this based on real life when you have so much different material to pull from.
I think the one thing that always popped in my mind, and now I understand why it didn't go in, and it made perfect sense. But when I thought about the story, like, oh, that might be an interesting thing to shoot, was the murder of Alex Rackley. I thought we would like show that explicitly, you know, all that crap. But Shaka explained why that didn't happen, and I was like, oh no, it's just too gruesome, and it does nothing really for the story other than just to establish. It's even more menacing when you have George Sams telling the story. It makes him so much more like creepy. So yeah, I got that, but I was always thinking about that in my mind about what that would look like.
Will, was there something for you?
Yeah, there was a scene in my original drafts and then I think in early drafts with Shaka. So Fred was in jail when he was in prison for the ice cream robbery, which he certainly didn't commit, for I think from May to August 1969. And so he was in jail during the moon landing. So I had the scene where he was recruiting guys while the COs wanted everybody to watch the moon landing. And there's a couple of jokes that I like in there. You know, the CO says, like, hey, he's pissed off. He's like, you know, we just put a fucking man on the moon. He says, you let me know when they put all white men on the moon. I'll watch the shit out of that. And then the COs,
that's such a great
then the COs retaliated by making all the other guys, and this is something that really went on at Menard. I found this in my research. I don't know if it was happening in the 60s. It was happening in Menard prison in the 70s and 80s, called Nuts to Butts, where they made the guys take off all their clothes and wrap their arms around their guys' waist, so they're like, you were basically like humping the dude in front of you in like this daisy chain circle. And I think that that was maybe also sort of pointlessly brutal.
Right.
Right. Like some of the CIA humiliations that they did, back in the early OOs.
Yep. I mean, it's like, it already feels like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially the second act. And it's like, you don't even need more because
you mentioned just before him going to jail for $70 worth of ice cream, and it's just kind of mentioned in the film. We don't really see as much. Was there ever any basis to it, or was it just random charges?
The crazy thing is, so the Crowns were modeled on the Peastone Rangers, which is the real gang, became the El Rukins. We had the Peastone Rangers in our script. We had the leader, a guy named Jeff Fort, and Fred Henry Jr. told me, Shaka, hey, if you guys use his name or even the gang's name, they're going to kill you. He said, oh, okay, we'll change that then. That's how they became the Crowns, the fictional Crowns. But the really crazy thing, so there was a robbery of a good humor truck in the summer of 68. It might have even been 67. and a Keystone Ranger, 3 Keystone Rangers beat up the guy, and Fred knew who it was and didn't dime on him, which is really, really shocking. And I tried to incorporate that at some point that was in the script about how like just fucking give him up. He's a fucking stone, you know. And yeah, it's nuts. There was a robbery. Three kids beat up an ice cream truck guy and passed out ice creams in a playground. And because they wanted to
remember the scene you guys wrote where I think it was Jeff Fort. He pulls up in a limo. It's in one of the earlier drafts, but one of the middle drafts. So Jeff Fort pulls up in a limo and hands Hampton money. I forget who he had. I don't know. It was one of the funniest scenes I've ever.
And that may have been historically true. And Jeff Fort was one of Hampton's pallbearers at the funeral.
Oh wow!
So they really did form this kind of at least superficial closeness. Like they never like unified in terms of political organization, but they were politically simpatico and friendly, certainly.
Right.
Another fascinating arc was the fact that basically you were able to, for a large group of people, simplify it to Fred, Bill, Roy, and Judy. So at what point did you kind of navigate the waters of how much of Judy to incorporate? Because, you know, it was good to see her there. And obviously she continues to carry the legacy. I could have seen you getting lost in the weeds for it, but it seemed like just enough of it being correct while also allowing for her to, again, be fish out of water as the new student that's hearing Fred speak.
Oh, you mean Deborah?
That's it. What did I say?
Yeah, Judy.
Judy Harmon is the
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. You know, I remember in some of the earlier drafts that you guys wrote, Deb wasn't as not that she wasn't fleshed out, but she wasn't as like involved. And I think as the drafts, you know, got closer and closer to production, she became a more prominent character. But it's like it's hard. Like when you see Dominique and you see how well she played the part, it's like it's hard to. It's like she could have her own movie, right? Like that's how big of a star she is, and that's how big of a character she was in Fred's life.
Right.
She was so quintessential. So I think it was important to make her a more robust character. And I think Will and Shaka did a phenomenal job.
Because in our outline, we didn't have Deborah in our story because we don't know for female characters. But it's not our bread and butter. But yeah, I think that Will and Shaka, the way the character is just so rich and the poetry. I mean, it was
It really made her just a very fleshed out human being. She just feels like a real character, and I think she humanizes Fred so much. She's just quintessential to the story.
Right.
You know, earlier Will said that you know, he was kind of monologuing a little too much, but there's some great speeches that Fred gave, and I'm guessing that they were based on archival speeches, especially the speech when Roy's in the audience as well. You know, when Roy was undercover. How did you pick which speeches to use, and especially anything you want to tell us about that great scene?
I mean, we tried to stay verbatim as much as possible, and certainly we can't write better than Fred Hampton did. So that's sort of a luxury, and it's just the luxury. There's nothing bad about it. So we tried to stay verbatim, but we definitely did a lot of editing, and we'll pull pieces from some speeches and put them together. The I'm Revolutionary, that's probably the biggest chunk that's lifted straight from that moment, which was the the first speech he gave after getting out of prison in August of '69. And a lot of that is verbatim and in order. But typically we try wherever possible to use his words, but certainly in different orders and different contexts.
Okay. So just as dialogue throughout, that makes sense. You would cull what you could from written and recorded history. That makes sense. You know, when you're dealing with great actors like Daniel and Lakeith, sometimes they have requests of their own. Were there any specific actor rewrites that you guys needed to do at any point? Something that you needed to flesh out, or something that was needed during shooting?
Dominique added the poem, right?
Yeah,
she added.
She wrote that.
She wrote the poem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's a pivotal scene, maybe the most important scene in the movie.
Yeah,
and she that poem sort of synthesizes all of the themes that are expressed throughout the film. It's a very important scene, and I think that poem just took it to the next level, and it clearly made it, to me at least, the most important scene.
The George Sams subplot was kind of interesting. When did you arrive at that, and how did you decide to incorporate it? Because it kept the fires burning of the trouble that Bill could get into.
I mean, it was there all along in my drafts because it put such a. That's all true. Mm-hmm. This 18-year-old kid from New York, Alex Rackley, was murdered in New Haven by an FBI informant, and then they used him to set up warrants. They would just send them around the country, different chapters, and then write harboring a fugitive warrants. So it was all true, it was all there, and it was this great thing to kind of really terrify O'Neill. I think that has been there all along.
I think in the interview, Bill O'Neill actually, at least the long form interview, Bill O'Neill talks about. Mm-hmm. He talks about that. He definitely talks about Jake Winters, which is another scene. I think that's
because it also shows the threat that's coming for him and what could happen to him if he's discovered. But at the same time, it shows this concept of other Judases. He realizes that there are others that are as compromised as him, to show the horror of the systemic racism that was.
There was an entire program, the Ghetto Informant Program, run during the COINTELPRO period, and they had 7,000. 7,000.
It was just so terrifying about Lil Rel's reveal. Like, oh shit, I'm not the first. Like, this dude's a half a generation older than me. And but I want to say one quick thing about George Sams. The other thing, which I think was there at some point, we had to jettison. So even though the FBI knew that Sams killed Rackley, like their own guy, Erica Huggins was the leader of the New Haven chapter, and the FBI was all set to pin Rackley's murder on Eric Huggins and Bobby Seale, and they took them to trial for it. And they didn't get a conviction because it was bullshit. But it was even worse than just we're going to instruct our informant to murder a 18-year-old, but then we're going to try to pin it on Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins, which is crazy. I mean, and Erica Huggins was involved. There's really horrifying audio footage online you can find of like the mock trial they did for the guy, which is just it's just awful. But anyway, the FBI was like all set to use it to put Bobby Seale away.
Ugh.
Have any officers ever been held accountable for just especially the straight up murder and maiming in the final scene?
No.
Okay. Really
They've
depressing.
all been identified though. The 13 guys or 15 guys from the CPD, but they're all identified by name, including most likely the two guys who shot him in the head.
Yep.
Earlier on, you mentioned The Departed, and again, like that's a good touchstone here, because essentially one of the really gritty aspects of the screenplay is a character that has a secret. It's something that just always adds a little extra to a movie, especially when the audience is in on the secret, right? It's not a mystery here. So you see Bill's character twisting and turning in the wind between his alliances, which in the beginning he doesn't seem very politically motivated, but certainly by the end, tell us about kind of when you would alert and remind the audience of the dangers, because it's kind of like structured throughout, in which it starts small. At first, it's like a veiled threat of like, you'll go to jail if you don't just go sit in on these meetings. Then it's like, now that we're paying you, we're gonna, it might leak out that you're an informant. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse, to the point towards the end where he's basically forced into it. And even if he wants to leave, he has that weird visitation at the bar by what seemed to be other African-American agents, if I understood it right, that were also informants as well, kind of showing him that he could have no refuge anywhere. So just tell us about kind of that structuring, because it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And again, it was Lakeith played it absolutely amazingly.
Stellar.
Yeah, Lakeith's, part of it is, Lakeith's acting ability, but also it's like, even when you read the transcript and you read the story, you know what I mean? Like, how he tells the story, he tells it as a crime drama. You kind of
as a what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
A crime drama. Yeah, and what Will and Shaka did with the script, I mean, they can go into more detail about it, but they structured it, I thought, perfectly.
Will, was there anything that you had about knowing when to put in those moments of danger for Lakeith's character?
I mean, I think structurally, maybe another thing that sort of fell in our lap, whether or not this was historically true, was just having the rat in the middle playing both ends against the middle. There's a nice little ping pong there to have him swing between extremes, I think. And I, and in a weird way, like I'm glad that's all still there, because there were early iterations where he sort of got much closer to Mitchell. And I feel like, that we sort of toned down some of that stuff. But I think it's sort of there naturally that this guy who's a cipher, who sort of thinks he's outsmarting everyone, is ultimately kind of, is unraveling his own psychic life.
Well, and that's the craziest part is that ultimately, he rebuilds the community center from the ashes, literally. So he was personally as invested as you could be physically. But at the same time, there's that scene at the end where it seems like it's insinuated at one point he might even become an FBI agent, was one of the things that they dangled in front of him, right? In which maybe he would get the badge for real someday or something. But ultimately they offer him a gas station, and like selling out an entire community was, here's a gas station. Right. I mean, it was just such a great cold scene that just all the tones and nuances I thought were kind of perfect for. So, kudos for that. Obviously, it's called Judas and the Black Messiah, and you have a Last Supper-esque scene the night of the event. Right. Talk about the challenges of crafting that without ever getting sentimentalist, which was something I also appreciated, because sometimes in biopics or in historical dramas where, we know the outcome of history, there is a tend towards sentimentalism, but I didn't really feel it here. It felt very honest and open, and even though we know the dread is on its way.
I think the key to that, honestly, is the script pretty much hewed very closely to facts. I mean, I think they did an exceptional job of dramatizing actual events. Right. A lot of times in biopics, you get, they go otherworldly, and that they're not hewing too closely to facts, and it just feels like a Hollywood movie, and you just know that they're manipulating it to reach an end. I think
it also helped that we had Mama Akua as a consultant, so she could actually, give texture to the scenes. You know what I mean? Like, I think her advice was indispensable, right? Because she was there. You know what I mean? So, like, when I think she said, I read in an interview, like, they came down to the Panthers headquarters, and she felt like she was actually there. Right. Like, when you hear her saying things like that, that's when the production designers, the costume designers, and everyone involved in just the craft of making the sets. I mean, they really paid close attention to detail. Right.
Will, did you have any thoughts about the Last Supper scene?
Yeah, I think again that's a sort of happy accident of the real history that there was this supper. I think in reality, Fred had taught a political education class beforehand. Right. And it was really late, but there was a big pot of spaghetti and there was a pitcher of Kool-Aid, and that's what O'Neill poisoned most likely. And one of the little tiny things I was really sad to see go was we written the scene where everyone, it's late at night and they're all eating dinner, and then we sort of do a time jump. Everyone's gone. O'Neill's alone in the kitchen, kind of obsessively washing the glass. Like we've seen the glass that we know he poisoned, and he's just kind of, it's sort of the grail, and he's just trying to get the guilt out. And I just like that image. Like I remember just watching it in the Village. I think when we shot it and just being like, oh, it's, it's like this sort of like very, very 1960s green jade glass, cheesy glass cup. And it just felt like so like a rare moment for O'Neill, the character, to be doing something truthful, even though it was part of the act. It was a genuine moment of trying to absolve himself. And I just like that because it was so rare for him to be genuine.
Yeah. Beautiful thing.
I mean, it was also, devastating as well, because earlier in the film, not only did you show the positive side that we know has existed about the Black Panthers that people haven't seen, you showed him unifying different communities in Chicago, including, some white folks that were kind of, holding a meeting that we see with a Confederate flag that, somebody like Fred would not be welcome to, but his charm won them over. And then we see them all working together, a few scenes later. And so, look, editing is the last stage of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious what you guys would say your lessons were in the editing room. Scenes that you saw either shift from different places that you didn't expect to see them move to, or cut scenes that you kind of missed that were shot that are, maybe going to be a part of a Blu-ray extra or something one day.
Yeah. So we got a chance to see the rough cut, right? Because we went to Manhattan and saw a rough cut, and it was sprawling and epic, and it wasn't like color corrected just yet. I don't think sound was done. We had to do ADR, all that stuff. But there were some scenes in there, especially it goes back to the Lakeith scene when he's trying to get back inside.
Because there was a plot line in the story where Bill O'Neill gets kicked out, and then he has to come back in, and so like it was awesome. It was a pretty awesome scene where you see him trying to convince Fred to get back into the Panthers.
Well, that happened a few times in which his loyalty is tested. He has to prove that he knows how to steal a car. He's recognized as a possible informant. Why do you think this plot line was cut? Was it just redundant, or was it just a time issue?
I don't think it was redundant. No, I feel like it was because it just. Why did we? Yeah, why did we?
I think I can answer that. I think the problem was. Fred Jr. didn't want us to be implying that any of it was Fred Sr.'s fault. That if O'Neill had been kicked out, and the way we shot the scene, he's literally crying on the doorstep, and they're probably crocodile tears, but you can't tell because he knows he's about to kill the guy. And Fred's like, "All right, you can come back." And I think Fred Jr. was like, "Nope, you're not going to imply it was his fault." And we're like, "Okay,
right." Which is totally legit.
Totally fair. But Shaka loved that stuff too, and I think he was sad to see it go too.
Yeah, I think we all love that scene, but we also understood the logic behind why it couldn't be there.
Right.
Were there any other scenes that you missed that were cut?
I mean, I feel like it was honestly it was kind of edited perfectly.
Okay, fair enough.
It all works. I mean, I outside of that one scene with Lakeith, I feel like everything.
Yeah, I mean, the edit to me is. It's pretty flawless. I mean, and I'm biased, but I think it's really good editing.
Great.
And I feel like the one lesson I learned, instead of like, oh, I wish that were there, it really, watching a dozen cuts or whatever it was, really showed me just how little you really need to traumatize or depict or convey whatever you're trying to convey. There were so many sections, like just lift that out, and it was fine. And especially as a writer, you're like, no, it's all you need it all. And it's like very enlightening to watch that.
It's also like Shaka's direction. He does long takes, and he's just a cinematography though. It's just he's an artist. I mean, I don't know. It's just like
and you get so floored by just the immersive nature of the film itself. It's like I wasn't even thinking about like what didn't make it in. It's just like it's such a cohesive film, and I don't know. I think it was just brilliantly crafted.
Okay, so what was your toughest scene? What was the scene that you each came back to over and over trying to get right? And how did you creatively rise to that challenge? Will, starting with you, what was your toughest scene on the page?
That's a great question. And maybe because it's still really fresh in my mind, I'd have to think about it more. But off the top of my head, I would say it was the Last Supper scene. There was this, I wasn't trying to make O'Neill sympathetic, but there was this version I did, which I gave to Shaka, where O'Neill is there, and I wanted to milk all that shit. I wanted to like let that like it's the critical moment for both these guys, right? And I really wanted it to breathe. And I get that it's already a long movie, and that's again, I'm the guy who has all the speeches in the first draft. But I had O'Neill kind of like stewing in his own guilt and misery, and listening to Fred talk about his kids and where to go. And I had O'Neill kind of blurt out like, "Algeria, Cuba, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, take the money the guy gave you, take Deborah, get on a fucking bus to anywhere, leave right now." And like essentially trying to say like, something's happening tonight, just go. And Shaka was like, "No, we can't. That's Fred's fault again." And I get that, but we must have written 25 versions of that Last Supper scene that were mostly about kind of the sort of arc of it, like going from point A to point B to point C, and really just trying to winnow it down to essentials. Which, having just said that less is more, I still really miss some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Kenny and Keith, were there any scenes that what was your toughest scene?
I think the most challenging thing for us, honestly, was the opening. Like, how do you capture the essence of Bill O'Neill in the opening scene, get all the information that you need while also telling a compelling story while you're doing it? And, because the original story is he stole a car, he went across state lines, and then he got contacted a couple of months later by Roy Mitchell. And I was like, that doesn't work as a scene. And so what Will and Shaka did I think it was just beautiful. I think that they streamlined that story, got all of the relevant information out, and crafted a beautiful opening scene, not including the cold open.
Was there anything you guys had to rewrite during production? That was something I forgot to ask earlier.
There were a lot of rewrites during production. Right? I mean,
no, but like a big scene that you remember, like, oh, I'm on set. They're going to be shooting in an hour.
I don't know. Were you on set, Will? When
I was on set the last 2 weeks, so I can only speak to that. From my experience in the last 2 weeks, it was mostly minutia that Fred Jr. was like, this wouldn't be like that wouldn't be like that, and occasionally there's like a huge ripple effect where he's like, yeah, the internal politics of Chicago gangs, you can't do this thing. And I'd be like, well, it's a movie. Can we please just do this thing? Like, there'd be a lot of that kind of finessing.
Yeah. And it was like that when we were on set. We got there, we did 2 weeks as well, but we split our weeks. And there was one part where I think it was Sev and Shaka, and they were, trying to figure out.
Sev is an executive producer.
He's an EP on the film, and
he's also a really talented screenwriter.
Very talented screenwriter.
Co-wrote Run. He was in my podcast for Run.
It was just a stacked lineup of talent across the board. And Sev was working very closely with Chairman Fred Jr. to just try to, work on any of the notes that they had on the script throughout production. Right. So there were a lot of probably changes throughout, but I wasn't witness to all of it, but some of it.
Great. Well, I loved what you guys did. And so what's next? What are you guys working on next? Lucas Brothers, it was just announced that your Judd Apatow thing is going to be going into production at some point. It seems like your script is already done. Do you want to give us a title or any pitch for it?
Yeah, I don't have a title yet, but right now we're just thinking about casting. Just like, how can we get the funniest people to be in this movie? Right.
Is it autobiographical? Which I think
autobiographical. Semi. Yeah.
So are you guys going to be in it?
We're playing some version of ourselves.
Okay. So you'll be in it. Okay, good.
It's fun. Can't wait to shoot. Big props to Apatow Productions, and we're very excited for that.
Is there anything else in the works, or is that your biggest project?
We're also working on a film with Lord and Miller, and we're working on a film with Seth MacFarlane. So
great,
a lot of comedy films.
Do either of those have titles or anything you could tell us about?
One is a reboot of Revenge of the Nerds.
Right.
Oh wow, is that for Lord Miller?
No, that's
for Gotcha. Well, I could definitely use one. That would be great. Will, what are you working on?
I just finished a spec feature, sort of grounded sci-fi that I've given to friends, and I'm sort of getting notes on now. And
Does it have a title?
It's called The Age of Man, and I'm pitching a couple pilots that I'm hopeful about. That now that people seem to want to read me.
Well, you guys have been very generous with your time, and congrats on an absolutely great film. I love Judas and the Black Messiah, so I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks again for your time, guys.
Of course. Thank you.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writers Will Burson and Kenny and Keith Lucas for being so generous with their time and chatting about their WGA-nominated film, Judas and the Black Messiah. And if you haven't yet seen Judas and the Black Messiah, congrats on listening this far, but I hope you continue to spread the word about it, because it just, aside from having great writing and direction, also has some great performances as well. So thanks for continuing to spread the word about it. And of course, while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could find us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. You could read us by test driving us by reading the entire free issue over at backstory.net or in our app. And it'll really give you a sense of who we are and what we do. And if you like us well enough that you want to subscribe and support our efforts during the pandemic, that would be fantastic. So I'm happy to reward you with a discount coupon code. The code is SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. And you can enter that at backstory.net. And that'll also allow you to use your login credentials in the iPad app as well. So there's a lot to explore. You'll also get access to our archive, which currently goes back to around issue 29. And we're constantly adding older issues to it when we have time between our newer issues. So right now is like one of those times. But anyhow, you know the score. There's a lot to explore over at Backstory. So thanks for considering supporting my passion project. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. If you want to get a hold of me, you could always reach me on social media as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram. You could also reach me as backstory_mag on Twitter or backstory_mag on Instagram as well. I have a Facebook fan page. I'm not on there as often, but you could reach out there as well. You could also always email me at yogoldsmith@gmail.com. I promise to not respond immediately. That's the one guarantee I'll give you, but I will try and get back to you. So I'm an easy guy to reach. Look, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.